Ready, set, and begin.
You know, as a leader, as a Black leader in a country that is still dealing with some very serious unresolved issues as it relates to the Black experience in this country, I go into a lot of difficult spaces. I wrote a piece immediately following the beginning of this controversy, talking about wherever my people are, that's where I must also be.
You study dead bodies. What made you get into that field?
You know, I give a voice to the voiceless. You know, I provide information to the community about violence, whether it's homicide or suicide. I provide this information so it can be used in a way where programs and policy can be established to decrease this problem in our community.
Okay.
Good afternoon, OIC friends and family. Welcome to the OIC of America 2020 People, Purpose, Passion, Fireside Chat, and Awards Gala. I want to wish a happy holiday season to you all, and thank you so much for tuning in to spend your Friday afternoon with us. We have some very special guests to introduce to you, starting with OICA President and CEO, James Haynes.
So good afternoon, all. And Kaya, thank you for that warm welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm going to just give you just a couple of minutes about the organization. So thanks for taking the time to join us this afternoon. As you'll find out in the next couple of minutes or so, is that we've got a dynamite a duo that's going to give you some information and really energize you around the work that they're doing, as well as how that complements the work that you do. So for those of you who are not familiar with OIC, and there are some, we have been around for plus 50 years or so. We are located, there are 31 affiliates, and we're located in 19 states. And I also want to give a huge shout out to what I would consider the VIPs that are part of our organization that's been doing the work over the last several months of really making meaningful support and adjustments to their lives so that they can actually continue to help others. And that would be the folks that work in the OIC network. So thank you for all that you do. And I know that you have worked tirelessly, but just some highlights of things that we've done over the last several months is that we've been really focused on a variety of different areas. Is that we've pivoted as an organization to bring content online in terms of being able to provide educational support and internet support along with computers for kids and organizations that need it. We've had affiliates within our organization who actually do a great job of providing food security in terms of being able to feed those that need food support. And then lastly is that we actually participated nationally within a huge voter engagement program that we ran during the summer. And what I would encourage you to do is that this is not going to stop now, is that we typically turn out every 4 years for a major election, but we all know that politics is local, and recognizing that we are an organization that is in all of these places is that it's important for us to be engaged in that process. So I'm going to stop talking now and turn it over to Letitia Crippen, who is going to moderate the session. Letitia.
Thank you so much, James. I am so proud of all the work that the OICs across America has done this year, and super excited about this fireside chat. So for those of you who don't know me, hi, I'm Letitia Crippen. I'm the Senior Program Manager here at OIC of America. I am going to walk us through this amazing discussion. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us for our fireside chat with the honorary OIC family member, our brother, but you can call him Mr. Reverend Dr. Roger Mitchell. And I'll speak this into existence. We have our future member to the OIC family, the one and only Miss Tamika D Mallory. So thank you so much. So let's get into it. Our first panelist is Reverend Dr. Roger Mitchell. He is the Chief Medical Examiner for Washington, D.C. He's a native of Newark, New Jersey, bricks, and a graduate of Howard University, HU. I know some people are saying that right now. Dr. Mitchell is uniquely positioned to understand the social determinants that lead to violence affecting our most vulnerable communities. We run a reentry program, so Dr. Mitchell's work is so close to us. So thank you so much for coming back this year, Dr. Mitchell. Our second panelist is Ms. Tamika D Mallory. She's the co-founder of Until Freedom. She's a mother, a groundbreaking, award-winning social justice leader and movement strategist. No one can argue that she is one of the most powerful voices of my generation, at least, and for future generations, standing up for our rights in all corners of America. So thank you so much for joining us today, Tamika. So just to make sure everybody understands what we're looking to accomplish, like many institutions, OIC of America and its network is maturing. It's not a bad thing. We stand on the shoulders of those leaders who stood with our great founder, Dr. Leon H. Sullivan, during the Civil Rights Movement. Now we, the network, is called to develop the next generation of leaders. They're all in this room today. We have practitioners here who are working on the front lines, making a difference for returning citizens every day. And in the audience, they are considered our new soldiers. So today, like our founder, they fight against state-sanctioned racism instead of Jim Crow, mass incarceration instead of segregation, microaggressive and overt voter suppression, and continued blatant racism. So today we're asking you, Tamika, Mitch, help us find the motivation to keep them going, to dig deeper for our people, Black and brown people, Native American women, and other disenfranchised groups. They need your encouragement, okay? I said a lot. I'm gonna pause here. Any initial thoughts, Ms. Mallory or Dr. Mitchell?
Thank you. I mean, I need you with me on the road, so I'm gonna have to ask Mr. James whether or not it's possible to steal you away so you can come on with me and introduce, Mr. Haynes, I'm sorry, introduce us going forward. I'm sure Mr. Mitchell, Reverend Mitchell, Dr. Mitchell would appreciate the same. You have been just incredible in the way in which you frame this conversation. And I think that for me, when you talk about encouraging the listeners and the attendees, I think we all need to encourage one another in this moment, right? I think the fact that we keep going, despite all the challenges that we come up against, every day the news, if you really are paying attention, will really traumatize you. And that is coupled with our personal daily living, right? There's so much happening pre-pandemic, now during this pandemic, that seems like it's never ending. And in my opinion, a lot of it has to do with the level of incompetence that we have been experiencing and living under in this country. And unfortunately, whether you know someone personally who has passed away or not, there is a feeling among us all of tension and stress and trauma. And, our children are watching it. They are also experiencing. I was thinking the other day that all of my friends are like, I am not a teacher, and I'm not sure exactly how I got in this responsibility of homeschooling. But on one side, it has been bringing people closer together. And I make the joke all the time that you're finally able to see what your little children do in school, how they don't listen and they don't follow what the teacher is saying. So now when the teacher calls you, you can't say, not my Johnny, yes, you're Johnny. You're Johnny. But at the same time, after reading this study that was saying, when this is all said and done, white children may have lost 1 to 2 months of education because of the shifting, but most Black children would have lost a year just trying to get back to some level of normalcy. And I was talking to another young lady, and she was saying that her daughter told her at 7 years old, "Mommy, I'm miserable, you know, being at home all day, every day, being unable to go out." So again, the trauma is real. I think that, as with everything that we've ever been through as people of color, we have no choice but to push through. That's really the reality, right? How we do it as a unified force, how we do it in a way that does not shame people or judge people for needing to stop to take a break from the work. You know, because on top of everything that's happening in our lives, many of us are still on the front line. And that front line space, with a pandemic, without a pandemic, without all of those things, it can kill you. And we have to make sure that we are surrounded by individuals who can see when the burnout is coming and say, you know what, you need to take a break, and I am here to carry the baton and keep things going. And I think that is the spirit of how we should be moving forward. And certainly we can talk more about it as we go along. But I'm also just very grateful to be a part of the conversation.
Awesome.
You know, it's just great to be back with OIC. I've never left. You know, me and President Haynes have kept in touch over the year, and just want to give love to, you know, Shanique Banks and you, Leticia, and all the team that has been working hard to pull this together. You know, last year I said this, and I'll start by saying it this year, is that you cannot pour from an empty cup, right? And so as we're attempting to pour into others, right, which is the function and the goal of OIC, the function and the goal of Ms. Tamika Mallory, the function and the goal of mine, and all the networks that we're connected with of freedom fighters that want to see the liberation of our people, the completeness of the promise that our ancestors have prayed for and shed blood for. We're their answer, right? So we're their dream. And that dream fulfilled, quite frankly, is a dream established. So we are dreamers, right? So we are ones that are dreaming for something for our children, for Tamika and her son, and for me and my children. And so if we are going to be successful, we have to take time to sit by the fire. We have to take time to put our hands out and feel the warmth against our hands and our toes and in our face. Mm-hmm. We have to take the time to listen to jazz in the background, to smile and tell each other stories about what the future is going to be, how excellent freedom is going to look like. Yes. And we have to take time to pour into each other. And we have to make space to pour, to get poured into. So, and intentionally. And so there is no shame in saying, guess what? This is my time weekly. You know, God made it clear that there at least needs to be one day that you get poured into by him, and that you take time to rejuvenate. And we don't do that. We don't do it. I don't do it as well as I should. And so we have to take that moment to get full, so that when we pour into others, they have what they need, because they're counting on us as we're counting on others. So I'm excited to be part of this conversation. Excited to talk more about how we do it and how it needs to be done. And quite frankly, I'm selfish. In the midst of all the Zooms that happened before this call and all that will happen after this call, this is my opportunity to get poured into. So I enter this space, quite frankly, quite empty, right? as much as I am half full, I'm half empty. And so I'm hoping to get full by the end of this conversation. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Can anyone tell that Reverend is at the beginning of it? We received that word, Reverend, and that leads into the first question that I have nicely, when we talk about the generation and pouring into them. For either of you could take this question, how have you influenced millennials and Gen Z to participate in community engagement to build their platforms? What would you recommend to OIC workers around the nation regarding empowering our youth to get involved? We serve a lot of youth in a network. And so when we're talking about breaking the generational poverty cycle and getting them engaged, how have you done that? What does that look like for us? What would you say?
Well, one, I'd say that I'm incredibly impressed by many of the young people who are out here in communities doing great work at this point. Many of them are leaders in their own right. And I think as a result of the technology age and all the other things that has happened, unfortunately, to advance our young people a little bit faster than really they need to be. They're exposed to so much information. The things that my son is 22 and 21, he'll be 22 in March. And the things that he sees and understands and knows and has been for a while, ever since he's had a cell phone, which, these kids generally have technology very, very early. He's steps ahead of what I was prepared to discuss because of that access. And so these young people are really, truly, in my judgment, brilliant. And many of the movements that I'm involved in and the efforts that I have been calling myself leading, it's really been the young people who have been pushing me and being much more courageous. As I'm now 40 years old, I see what they mean when they say that as you get older, you get more wisdom, and then that wisdom sometimes turns into being a little bit too cautious about every single move you make. And these younger people, they push me. They tell me, well, we need to go harder. We need to do more. Maybe we should look at things in a different way. And it has actually helped to increase my courageousness on the ground. And so that's the first thing I will say, is that the young people who are out here are very, very impressive. And I think the second piece in terms of what OIC and all organizations can do is really to center those young people's voices at the table and allow them to be the ones to help lead the discussion on what the needs are. It doesn't mean, and I think, we have this problem that we run into whenever we talk about this sort of generational divide, where people believe that because we're asking someone else to have a seat at the table, it means that their seat disappears. It does not mean that. And in no way am I suggesting that our elders and those of us who are sort of in an older generation don't have to be at the table, because our wisdom is what keeps these young people from getting killed, as far as I'm concerned, while they're out there on the ground. But I don't believe, and I think this goes for more other areas and other very important areas outside of just dealing with young people, but I think it's dealing with disenfranchised folks, marginalized communities, that many of the tables we have built really are not led by the voices that we claim to be working on behalf of. And I think that once we get to a place where we're able to center the most impacted, that at that point, we will actually be able to, one, empower people to feel like leaders so that they are more inclined to keep coming back to the well, to keep drinking the water, but also it helps us to secure future generations and to really set up what is needed going forward. I won't talk too long, but my pastor tells a story of how he visited a church, and when he was there at the church, he said, he looked around and it was packed. Every seat was packed, people all throughout the building, and everybody was old. And he said, older. He said there were no young people there. And he told the pastor later on, your church is dead. It's beautiful, it's full, you have everything that you need, but you don't have young people, which means you can't live. There's no legacy. There's nothing to pass on to. You have to find a way to ensure that younger people are at the table and a part of the congregation. The pastor asked him, well, how do I do that? And he said, don't ask me because I'm older. You need to ask the young people how will they want to get more involved, and let them lead the way to bringing other younger people to the table.
Right. That makes perfect sense. And shout out to Giovanna. Tamika, can you give Giovanna a shout out from Chester County OIC? Because
Hi, Giovanna. How are you?
She submitted that question. She's from our Chester County OIC in Coatesville, and she is exactly what you talked about, a strong leader, young person, and bringing young people to the table as well. Thank you. Dr. Mitchell, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? I want to pivot just a little bit, but I didn't know if you were looking to
Well,
jump.
listen, you know, when they first talked to me about this, I said, you sure you don't want me to be the moderator? Because I want to, like I said, I'm getting poured into just being at the feet of Miss Tamika Mallory.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I would add and just echo, right? Because really when I'm in this space, I'm in the echo chamber, is that echoing that notion of empowerment, right? And getting young people to understand their passion and purpose, and understanding that in this Instagram environment, everybody wants to be a star. In a TikTok environment, everybody wants to be the center of attention.
Mm-hmm.
And if young people, if we're not in a place to give them the positive center of attention, right? I was just talking to a brother in community just 2 days ago. He said, Doc, he said, if we don't give them an opportunity to do things positive, then they're gonna be the center of attention on Instagram, on TikTok, doing the wrong things. So just the other day, we had someone beat like near close to his death, live streamed on Instagram. Just the other day, we had a carjacking, and the guy is in the car live streaming on Instagram like it's a video game, because the platforms, to Tamika's point, the platforms, the tables are not being set for young people to be the stars that they need to be, the leaders that they need to be. And so it's the real goal is that the platforms are not for us, right? So this is not our platform. We create platforms for others, right? So we need to be others centered. In this day and age, we think we want our name to be in lights. Really, the future of our people is about creating opportunities for them, for others to be better, right? And so it's always, it has to be about community and not about yourself. So we teach our young people as they're creating platforms, their platform they're creating is not for themselves. They're creating platforms for the young person next to them that they're bringing on, right? So it's never should be about themselves.
Right. I always say, like, it ain't about you, right?
No, it's not. I mean, I think that's so true in terms of creating these platforms that allow other people to sort of pick up the work and continue it and make it its own flavor and within their own flavor, or using their own flavor. The reason why that's so important is because too many of our institutions, after the leader passes away or moves on, they die. And I think sometimes some of our leaders don't even want to build institutions that allow for younger people to keep it going, because they want their name to be the only one etched in history. And I think that's problematic for us as a community. And it's why we find ourselves so often trying to restart, and pull together, our efforts again and get charged up. At the same time, to the young people who are listening, we don't need to keep starting a new foundation, a new organization, and a new thing all the time. Sometimes we have to get in line with what has already been created and help to make it better. So it's on both sides. There has to be a balance of understanding that institutions that have been in existence like OIC for years at this point need younger folks that are not like, I'm going to go copy the model. and do it elsewhere, but instead I'm going to go inside and fight within to help make the change. But one of the key things that I think is so important is that the reason why some young people, some of them just do it because, as they say, this new thing is called clout chasing. They just want to, copy someone else's work and start their effort. But a lot of times we have to understand, as folks who've been doing this work for a while, that some of the ways in which we operate does not allow space for these younger folks to find themselves and to be able to lead. So for instance, if your institution is not open to and really addressing the needs of Black trans women, you're gonna have a problem with younger people who are coming into the organization because they, whether they are trans or not, that is a part of their movement. They own the idea that trans people, Black trans women particularly, should not be killed just because they're trans and Black. And so when you have an institution where people are unwilling to deal with the LGBTQIA community, unwilling to talk about things like defunding the police, and just all these trigger words that our established folks tell us are bad and dirty and unnecessary, that really provides, unfortunately, a space for younger people to turn away.
That is a really good pivot to my next question, Tamika, because defund the police. Everybody gets scared when you bring it up. Some people don't want to use the language. In the matter of hashtag defund the police, it appears that people are dismissing the call to reallocate historically overblown budgets away from ongoing to ongoing militarization of our communities, and they're not putting it to reinvest into our communities and meet basic needs of the people. And so Kaya from OIC of America asked this question around, can you please explain what is fundamentally meant by the term defund the police? Because a lot of people don't get it. And as far as I'm concerned, OICs are the place where we're talking about reallocating those dollars towards. So people need to understand that this is in the benefit of the programs we have. So I'm sorry.
So, yeah, I'll jump in. I got the nod. The defund the police construct, I think, is about this reallocation and understanding that there's a need for comprehensive, ground up criminal justice reform in a way that completely rethinks how communities are engaged when a community is particularly in crisis, and completely deconstructing and pulling out any semblance of institutional and structural racism and classism out of the constructs of policing. And so I believe that there's opportunities, as someone who is a public health provider of violence prevention. I believe violence is a public health issue. And from that construct and from that lens, there's spaces and places where the Department of Behavioral Health will be better suited to respond to a issue than law enforcement. So for a good example, there in the criminal justice system, there's persons in need of supervision. Young people in the juvenile justice construct is called PINs, or it's called status offenses, truancy, staying out past curfew. Right now, in most cities, including the city that I live in, this is largely a law enforcement response. Law enforcement comes and engages these young people and then either takes them in or takes them home. But that's an interaction with law enforcement that really doesn't need to occur. It actually, if we build out a system of safe harbor and safe spaces and safe response from community, and community has the hotline number. OIC has a hotline where if individuals in Philadelphia or wherever you sit in Chester are saying, hey, there's a group of young people that are 3 o'clock in the morning out in front of this location. Instead of getting a law enforcement response, you get a community-based response saying, hey, what can we help you with? You can't be out here. Let's move you. Do you need a place to stay? Do you need a place to eat? Do you need services? Can we take you home? And then when you get home, if there's an environment where that home needs wraparound services, needs access to education, economics, housing, and environmental justice issues, then those nonprofits, those community-based organizations, or those non-law enforcement government organizations are in a place to provide support. So, but all of that needs funding, right? And that funding needs to come from somewhere. So as we transition from a law enforcement centric response to community, that those resources need to be provided to the organizations that are going to respond in lieu of law enforcement. So that's how I consume the defund the police hashtag.
So everything you just said, that, and I'm not going to repeat it because you said it perfectly. And I get really upset because people act like they don't know what we're talking about, although you keep explaining it over again. And and you know, I'll just come at it from a political perspective. There's a big difference between abolish police and defund police. There is a big difference. If we were saying, which I am an abolitionist and I want to live in a world where we don't need police, where the services that we provide are set up in such a way that the role of police becomes so little, if you will, probably not the right word, so reduced in our communities that eventually we don't need police at all. That's a dream of mine. You know, whether we'll ever get there, I don't know. But that's not what this movement is about right now. As Reverend Mitchell has said, it's about equitable, it's about equity, yes, but it's also about, I believe, and that's why I think the term defund police is so important, that you have not upheld the respect and service to the community in which you should have. And therefore, there needs to be a reallocation of funds away from this particular line of enforcement, right? We need a new way. We need something different, is the campaign that Until Freedom is now embarking upon. So yes, we need the language to be hard, because the people dying is hard. It's not about being politically correct. Someone said on my page the other day, we went from F the police, which we used to say, to now we're saying defund the police, and that's a problem. And you really kind of just want us to say, please stop killing us, please, please, please. Well, we tried that, it didn't work, right? Colin Kaepernick kneeled quietly and they said he was disrespecting the flag. And they're going to try their best to use, and we are sucked into it as people who are supposed to be liberal, supposed to be progressive. We're being sucked into their plan. The strategy is to keep us all arguing about the title and the slogan, defund the police, and therefore keep our attention shifted away from what we really need to be talking about, which is the plan. Because everyone is so focused on the slogan, even President Obama, who I love, but I've had to challenge President Obama on his statements about the slogan. I get it. If you don't like it, that's fine. But guess what? We as activists and the people on the ground, and the place where defund the police really rose from and where it was birthed, we don't have to have the same language as legislators and leaders in places, in positions of power that can make real decisions about the actual plan. You come and tell us, we decided we're calling it pin the tail on the donkey. And this is what the plan is. And we're gonna say, pin the tail on the donkey it is. That's great. They don't wanna do that. They want us to get caught up in a conversation about slogans because they know that it will keep us fighting and being divided within our organizations and within our movement. And I think that what we should do, someone says, Shonique, oh, that's you, Shanique, says it's a distraction. And it is a distraction. And I think at this point, what we have to do is keep our eyes on the ball. And every time someone starts talking about how the language is so dangerous, say, okay, fine, put it to the side, call it whatever you want, but let's get to how it's going to actually happen.
Right.
So that's the only other thing that I would share.
No, and your point, is so extremely important. So, one of the things that I'm the chief medical examiner, but right now I'm the interim deputy mayor for public safety and justice in Washington, D.C. And so my job is to translate the call, right? My job is to translate that call. Now, there's some communities don't have a translator of the call to freedom and liberation. Listen, the liberation of Black people has always been scary for those that don't want to be liberated, both Black and white. So that's a good thing. So defund the police. If it makes you nervous, then it's doing its job. It's doing its job. You know what I'm saying? And I love it because it's hip hop. Hip hop as a culture calls things the way it needs to be called and lets it fall the way it falls. I mean, I'm ex-gen and we grew up, hip hop is our culture.
Yeah.
And so making sure that the passion is there, and then force the legislators, it couldn't have been said better, to force the legislators to translate the call from the people into real thing. And that's why I talked about the concrete piece surrounding persons in need of supervision, or these truancy issues that are getting law enforcement and a response. And then how does law enforcement show up? Right. So there's hashtag no more jump outs, right? So squads that are going into our communities and jumping out on our communities and patting down individuals and are terrorizing our Black and brown communities as law enforcement. That's what defund the police is about, right? It's how police are showing up in our communities with this level of disrespect that is not providing safety and assurances in community. That has to stop. And if it's funded, it needs to be unfunded. And that's the call, I believe, that defund the police, just to add to what Tamika is describing.
No, I appreciate that. It does have to stop. And so with a lot of the attendees today are part of the SOAR program, which is our reentry program that we operate throughout 11 affiliates across the country. And we're serving thousands and thousands of returning citizens who are subject to these jump outs for absolutely no reason. And then the people who are watching right now, they're the ones going to court, getting their things thrown out, getting them on the bracelet so they don't have to sit in the prison cell, waiting for a court date, and just all these different things. And so the criminal justice system is broken. We know that. We're experts at how broken it is. But I would like to know if you could share any policies that you're passionate about, that you think we need to reform. Which ones of those are crucial right now at this moment? As a publicly funded institution, right? How do we rally around them? I want to add that piece in there.
So there's a lot in terms of policy, and it almost is overwhelming because, when asked that question, you have to try to figure out, like, which thing am I going to talk about today to keep from speaking the entire time of the panel. There's so much that people are presenting, and that's kind of what frustrates me about the defund police movement, is that there's so much that people can pull from what is coming from the ground right now to actually get things done. And instead we're, caught up in a conversation that is actually not beneficial to any of us. But I will say that the George Floyd Act, I think, needs to be passed, right? It has within the package a lot of things that are important. A ban on no-knock warrants. That's really super important in terms of what happened to Breonna Taylor. And then now I just, looking at my Instagram page, I see that there are over 1 million people who have watched the video of a woman who over a year ago, Miss Young in Chicago, was terrorized by police who used a battery ram to go into her house to find somebody who was actually next door. A social worker, exactly. And so, and God is amazing. I don't know who. Well, Reverend Mitchell is here, and I'm not a preacher, but
this is
God
a
is amazing
organization.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm definitely in the right place. you know, you have the case of Breonna Taylor, and people say, well, her ex-boyfriend, he was into illegal activity, and you know, and Kenny Walker, her new boyfriend, he shot his gun, which is actually legal in the state of Kentucky. Everybody has a gun. Everywhere you go, people have guns, and you have the right to fire a warning shot. And so that's what he actually did. And they come up with these excuses about why it happened to her, right? And well, you know, the police, you know, it's unfortunate. Everyone says, oh, it's unfortunate, but you know, it's not their fault. Okay, well, now it happened to Miss Young. Okay, so you can't say Miss Young was with somebody who was a boyfriend who was a drug dealer or anything. It tells you there's something wrong with the system, period. So something like ending no-knock warrants is extremely important, because only in our communities are people running through the door like wild animals, killing our women. They didn't kill Miss Young, but they could have, right? They absolutely could have. And trying to get individual states to pass that legislation is difficult. People are doing it. It just happened in Virginia, where they have passed a ban on no-knock warrants. They're working on it in New York, and other states are absolute states and cities are working on it. However, we need a ban from a federal level, so that across the nation, people know that if they do continue no-knock warrants, they're going to have issues with their funding that comes down from the federal government. Other things that are in that package, like qualified immunity, ending that, giving us the ability to actually sue police officers directly, because, and it's so crazy, because they will tell you that there's only a few bad apples. That's what they'll say to you. That you'll hear the unions, the PBA, and all of these individuals, that, you know, anybody who's trying to defend the police, mayors and otherwise, saying our police department is not inherently racist. It's just a few bad apples. And then we say, okay, cool, let us sue the few bad apples. And they say, no, we can't do that. Well, which one do you, is it the bad, a few bad, exactly. Where are, you know, because it's all just 3-card Molly. They're shifting the cards around to keep you from actually finding the thing that creates accountability. And so those are just 2 things in that package, and there's much, much more. And I suggest that people, if you don't know, the George Floyd Act is actually on Mitch McConnell's desk, and he's blocking it, doesn't want to pass the bill. And that's why being here in Georgia is so important, to get out the vote, because we need to actually confirm to get 2 other senators in office who actually believe in our mission and to some degree align with our agenda, so we can actually get that bill passed, and others. But the last thing, and I hope that this sort of kicks off to Reverend Mitchell and gives him the ability to speak deeply about this. And I work very closely with a young woman in New York, Erica Ford, who I know is watching. She's not that old. Oh, there she goes in the comments. She's not that young. She's older than me. She's my elder, but I work very close with Erica. And for years, we've been talking about making sure there is a federal mandate that says that gun violence is a public health crisis in our communities, so that we can get the type of resources necessary to deal with all the challenges. Because if you ask any one of us who actually works in the community, we can already see who the shooters are going to be before, as they are growing up, based upon the challenges that they're facing. They have a family member who has alcoholism or drug addiction issues that's not being addressed. Unless you are addicted to opioids and very fair skin, nobody's really trying to help you with your drug addiction problem. They're trying to lock you up. And once you lock up the parent who has the disease of addiction, we know what that causes for the child. It's the same cycle. I don't have to explain it to you all. It's the same cycle over and over again. You're not getting properly educated. You're living in food deserts, where we were in Kentucky, when we lived in Louisville, Kentucky. There's one supermarket, one Kroger. And when the uprising happened and people were protesting, Kroger shut down and people couldn't get fresh food. So they were using corner stores, and which there are not many, if you know anything about, you know, area down south, or, you know, some people say Kentucky is not really down south. I don't know what you call it. They're kind of southern, but not. But anyway, I digress. But, you know, but those food deserts, these are things that create situations where young people end up with guns in their hands because they either don't have the resources or don't have things to do to keep them busy and to keep them growing and thinking. And so I think that declaring gun violence in America as a public health crisis is something that we should all be pushing for. And I know that it's work that Reverend Mitchell, Erica Ford, and others have been leading.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's it. You know, that's it. It is a public health crisis. It is an epidemic that is claiming the lives of so many. Gun violence, you know, and is truly, and it's based in the social determinants of health, right? It's based, you know, where we live, work, play, and have our being. So what Tamika's describing, food deserts and lead-filled water. You know, the environmental conditions that the Hip Hop Caucus operates and advocates against inequities in those areas. I'm on the board there. Terrence Muhammad is on. Shout out to Hip Hop Caucus. But these are the things, these social determinants that is criminal justice reform, right? Is the work of criminal justice reform. And we know that access to jobs is a critical important. Access to vocation is critically important. So that dovetails and speaks directly to OIC's mandate and the historical constructs that Leon Sullivan put in place that, you know, put a paintbrush and a hammer in brothers' hands that are willing and able and capable of working. And a living wage creates an environment in a man that he knows that he has something to provide for his family, for himself, for his mother, and for his siblings. I mean, that's all we want. Nobody wants to be on the block doing dirt. You know, I mentor and operate with young people in my own age on the block, and nobody wants to be on the block doing dirt. Nobody. There are, and those that feel like and are showing that they might want to, that's just a manifestation of the trauma that we all exist. You know, my dad was crack cocaine addicted. You know what I'm saying? And I remember him freebasing in the front of the car with people, and I'm in the back of the car with a He-Man on my lap. You talk about, that story is not as heinous as the stories that I hear every day surrounding the loss that young people feel. And then the behavior that comes out of trauma that goes unattended to leads to the destruction within the community that at its basis and its core is connected to institutional structural racism. So the care and work that we have to do in our community, guess what? Let me tell y'all something. Government is not going to help you. We have to force government to give us, to provide us the things that we need to be sovereign and free. Liberation is not something that can be given or can be taken away. We come in this world liberated and free. And it's the slavery that has been placed upon us that puts us in a position where we have to then strive for the freedom that is inherently in us. We're believing the lies that this country has told us about capitalism and consumption. And so the point of the matter is until we person by person, family by family, engage in a way that ensures us the freedom that we're looking for, until we realize that the mirror has the person in it, that has to change, right? And I'm not preaching pull yourself up by the bootstraps. What I'm saying is, OIC, you're the bootstraps. What I'm saying is that if we're not doing the work of our people for our people, then we're not doing it. If we're not the spook who sat by the door, then we're not doing it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so the criminal justice reform that we're looking for is, yes, putting pressure on government, putting pressure on law enforcement, putting pressure on the things that have been a structure to keep African Americans, African indigenous people to the land in this country in place, and to maintain white supremacy. Those structures, yes, we got to tear those down. Mm-hmm. But we also have to ensure that we're building a resolve within us to be able to pull those down for ourselves individually, and mentor each other and love each other through that process. There's so much and I know the question was surrounding policy. I talked about minimizing interaction with law enforcement that does not need to occur. So
Right.
whatever those policies are, particularly surrounding our juveniles, because the literature shows that if a juvenile comes into contact with law enforcement at any point, they have a higher propensity to become into contact with law enforcement again and again,
Right.
and then imprisoned, and then have to come out returning citizen. Right. And so if we engage in policy that minimizes interactions, particularly for nonviolent offenses,
Mhm.
then we're in that space. And then lastly, I'll just say this, because I'm a medical examiner, I believe that the data that we have surrounding deaths in custody is improper, poor, and does not represent the amount of people that are dying at the hand of law enforcement. Right now, all reporting of law enforcement deaths are done by law enforcement. Let me repeat that.
No,
Those
they
that are
lie.
reporting the deaths by law enforcement is happening from law enforcement. And what I've been calling for is a checkbox on the U.S. standard death certificate to ensure that it's physicians, it is the public health sector that is reporting out how many people are dying at the hand of law enforcement, so that we have an objective measure of this true epidemic. Now, we know it. We know it, from the 1900s, how many people were lynching, but it was our sister who categorized the lynchings in this country for us to really understand how many people were being lynched in the 1900s. And we need that same type of movement for us to categorize and show proof, and make sure that we have the proper data to support the policies that we're putting forward. So as a scientist, I put that forward.
Thank you. I appreciate the scientific perspective. I'm gonna shout out my alma mater, DU, all the scientists in the room. So I'm looking at the time. I'm typically the timekeeper. And I know we had one really burning question that was in the Q&A that I want to pose to our panel, and then go to some final thoughts, if that's okay with you all. So we have a question here from Ruben Blackwell, from Rocky Mount OIC. He's the president and CEO of Rocky Mount OIC. We love Ruben. And the question he has is, how do we intentionally, I think you all kind of got to this a little bit, how do we intentionally shift our own OIC culture to reflect generational cultural evolution in Black and brown progressive white communities? Strategy, recommendations. Like, that's a lot, right?
Yeah, I need but you know what? The Reverend Dr. Roger Mitchell is the most intelligent person that I know today, and therefore he's able to translate.
Listen, come tomorrow, I won't be. But today, I appreciate the moment in time. I'll take that. Listen, what I heard in that question is that, is really what Tamika spoke about earlier, the embodiment of a generational approach to this work, right? And because young people are gaining a seat at the table doesn't mean that our elders are losing their seat at the table.
Mm-hmm.
It's so extremely important to center the whole continuum, right? Because there's a level of resiliency that we don't really know, but for having conversations with our elders. There's a level of resiliency that happened when we were in Jim Crow, and they couldn't go to all the bathrooms and couldn't sit at tables until such time that we evolved into table sitting and our lunch counter moment, right? And until we pushed the envelope past what we thought was possible. Right. But there's a resiliency that existed in my mother, who's 74 years old, that lived through that. Right. There was an ability to operate within community and build community when the other community wasn't accepting of us. And in reality, there's some that believe that there was a time where that was better. I don't know who that is, right? There was a time when there that resiliency that kept the dollar circulating within the Black community 40, 50 times before it left, because it couldn't leave. And now that it can leave, it doesn't circulate at all in our community, right? And so that generational memory, just because we're trying to move fast into the future, right? That generational memory needs to be centered in OIC, right? So OIC in the local OIC must harness the movement that has brought us up till now, and must then focus and create vision for the future that we're all dreaming for.
Okay, great. So final thoughts. I could sit and talk to y'all all day, but I know y'all are tired. So final thoughts, because a lot of folks are looking for the inspiration. Where do you find your source of inspiration? And for those who don't know where to get it, where could they get it? Last thoughts for today. Dr.
The source of inspiration, you said, where do we get it?
Yeah, where do you, so you're working,
Right.
where do you get it? And if you can't find it, how can someone start to find their source of inspiration?
So, you know, for me, I tell everybody everywhere I go that one of the things that really helped me in my career and just in my life was surrounding myself with people who are positive and who want to see me win, right? I cut ties with those people who were in my life that, you know, there were benefits to being with them because, you know, they had access, resources, and other things. But I didn't feel like I could be my true self. And like those people were really invested in me. I think it was more so that they wanted, that I was as good as whatever I could do for them. And I decided that you need to find a tribe of individuals to do this work with, who are really, really for you, and you also have integrity and be for them. Because when I'm weak and I'm tired and I'm, you know, and I'm feeling like I can't continue, my tribe helps to either pull me through or they pick up the slack. And no one outside will ever know it. You know, they'll pick up the slack and then push me in front of the camera and say it, you did it, you know, you say it, and it'll all be about me, and it's their words, you know, because they did the research or they sat up all night trying to help me write parts of my speeches. These having a good family of people around to fight for justice and to fight for freedom with has probably been the most therapeutic thing that I've ever done in my life. And I'm very, very grateful to my team. And we fight and argue and fuss and carry on all the time with one another. But at this end of the day, we're fussing out of love because we want to be perfect. And we know perfection, as one of my partners, my son, will say, perfection can never happen. So we're constantly pursuing perfection. And so I think that's one. When I think about Erica Ford, who's in the comments, she's another person as part of my tribe, someone who I can depend on. And I think being a good person yourself is so important, because when you live a certain way that is not based on individualism, that is really truly about the work that you say you're trying to do, you will find people who will come to you and will be a part of that positive energy that you need to keep going forward. And then the last thing I'll say is that I twerk on the weekend if that's what I want to do. I post crazy stuff on my page. I talk smack. I go out. I hang out. I have a good time. I refuse to allow people to try to put me in a box that because I do this work, I'm not also a human person who has experiences, who likes Cardi B and listens to, you know, crazy music and all of those things. I can do that as well and still be my whole self. And if you can't accept me showing up as me, then I'm probably in the wrong room. And since I am the room, it's really you that's the problem and not me.
Okay, tell it. Dr. Mitchell, last word. Where do you find inspiration?
Yeah, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And so at the end of the day, I wake up every morning and I brush my teeth and I say, you didn't do it. You didn't do it. I tell myself that I am not who they say I was when I was the little fat boy from Jersey. Shout out to Pernell Bryce. I see you, brother. That little fat boy from Jersey that didn't have, much of anything, but had everything all at the same time, right? And all the things that we're trying to solve for as those that have been called to do this type of work or whatever work that we've been called to do, man, we feel a guilt. When George Floyd died, I wrote a piece called a piece on survivor's guilt. George and I are the same age. So I imagined that George watched the same cartoons that I watched when I grew up. George and I are the same age, so I imagine that he ate the same cereal and played with the same GI Joes. That he played kickball and he ran in the streets until the lights went out and was called home by his mother for dinner. Like D Smoke talked about, it was Campbell's soup over white rice, chicken with the skin on. Lowry's, I'm seasoned. So I remember George from my neighborhood. So why did he get killed and I didn't? Why did I get to live and he had to die? Why me, God? Why what am I supposed to do? Because he was supposed to be here with me. And so this is not anything other than a freedom play. We're called for a new reconstruction, my people. A time post-Civil War that we are to build all the things that we need to build for our community, by our community. And so where do I get inspiration? Where do I rest in the bosom of my God? I pray to him and love him. My family loves me. My wife told me she loved me this morning. That my daughter kissed me on my face. So those are the things that I rely on. So my message to OIC and whoever is watching is love the people that love you, and be able to receive unconditional love for the people that want to see you, as Tamika said, want to see you win. But understand your existence is not just for you.
Right.
It has to be for the people around you. So I'm just blessed to be here. I'm full now. I got something to pour out. I got something that I can pour out.
I know we are all full right now. Thank you so much, Tamika Mallory. Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Roger Mitchell, for joining us today and sharing and pouring into our network, and everyone else who is watching. Welcome to the OIC family. This is going to conclude this section of our conference event today. Please be on the lookout for more fireside chats as we go through the year in 2021. Thank you for everyone who joined us. We'll have a special treat from comedian Torre, Philly Zone. And then we also will have a virtual photo booth until 1:15 p.m. today. So,
Thank you, Letitia. We appreciate you as well. Thank you, Letitia. We appreciate you as well.
Thank you so much.
You did great, Tisha. You did fantastic.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mitchell.